Good evening. So, uh, we have seen forecasting, we have seen estimation, we have seen different models. Of course, models are required for estimation, models are required for recursive forecasting. So, we need to start with a model which we have seen how to identify because we plot the SAF, PSAF, and we try to look at the ACF PACF, sample ACF PACF, and then fix a model and start our model fitting procedures for the given data. Now what happens that at the end we would like to know whether this whatever model that you have started with and whatever model that you have started with and then proceeded towards estimating the parameters, estimating the forecast, is it really a good model? Because the model that you have started is with a lot of assumptions. So in regression analysis, you remember at the end, after fitting a model, we verify whether these assumptions are really true. Now, same is the situation in the context of time series analysis as well. After fitting the model, we get the residuals. So residuals represents what? Residual represents the innovation, the ZT, the white noise. So then we try to see that whether this ZT that you are getting, you won't get ZT as because ZT is something unobservable, but you get what you can denote it by some notation, but basically a representative of ZT. So it's like because your model is, say for example, your model is basically you have come up with so YT is some function xt minus sorry this is yt minus 1. There's some parameters and then zt. This is white noise. This is the model that you have proposed, and then you have fitted them in the sense that you have estimated the whole of this f. So maybe assuming the knowledge of f or linear, if it is linear then assume that f is linear. So you may estimate theta known form, and so you have estimated them. So this is completely known. So this is predicted. So then what is the error? Error is y hat, sorry, yt hat minus f of, this is yt minus 1. This is just function of yt minus 1, yt minus 2, etc. all of them. This. Now what we are saying is that maybe zt hat. So this zt hat or residual, error or residual. This zt hat has all the properties of this zt. So whatever assumption that you are making for the zt, that should true for zt hat as long as this model is correct, right? So all the assumptions of zt hold good for zt hat provided f yt minus 1 theta is the correct model and theta hat is a reasonably good estimator. Right? So what happens that if this particular ZT hat, which is basically the residual, doesn't satisfy the properties or the assumption that you have made for ZT, what does it indicate that? It indicates that there is something wrong here. Because that is why the ZT hat is not behaving like ZT. It should behave like ZT. Sorry, I think I made a mistake here. This is not YT hat. YT hat is this. So this is basically YT minus this, or you can simply write YT minus YT hat. Okay, so this is yeah. So now I'll be able to write properly. I'll just erase this. I think I should do this exercise with yeah. Okay, so maybe something has gone wrong. I think, okay, there's some problem. This is better. Okay, so this is basically, yeah, now I have. I think there's some problem. I mean, like, anyway. So, anyway, I think I'll just rewrite it. So, what we are talking is, we are talking about ZT hat, which is equal to YT minus YT hat, which is basically YT minus F YT minus 1 theta hat. Assuming F is known, okay, the form of F form is known. This could be a vector also, okay. So this is the residual. Now what the claim is that all properties of ZT should satisfy for ZT hat also, as ZT hat is a dummy of ZT. So when this will happen? This will happen only Fyt minus 1 theta is the correct model. Okay, because we don't know, I mean, whether it's, so what we do is that whatever assumption that you have made, so what are the assumptions? It's like Zt is the white noise, 0 sigma square, which means that expectation of Zt is 0, variance of Zt is sigma square, constant, free from T, and covariance between Zt and Zs is actually a function of this is basically 0 if t not equal to s and is equal to sigma square when t equal to s. So which essentially means that these are uncorrelated. So we need to verify these conditions. So I am going to verify these conditions 1, 2, 3. Now in fact this means what is happening is that you can actually divide by the variance of zt, which means that this will be, this has, so you will get the correlation between zt and zs. This should be 0 whenever t not equal to s and 1 whenever t equal to s. So what happens that this condition we are now trying to see what happens that in the case of zt hat and zs hat and see whether this is true. So the first thing that what we do is that plot ACF PACF of zt hat. That means the residuals. So what do you expect? You expect a picture like, for example, if you are plotting, this is the lag, this is h. So suppose this is 0, this is 1. So you expect this to be 1. And all others should be 0. And since you are actually doing it for a sample, what it means that it may be there, but it is not significant. So like for example, if you are drawing this line, a confidence interval, so these won't be significant. So we expect this type of a picture, and if you get this picture, it essentially means that the residuals are behaving like white noise. So this is what we check, whether the residuals behave like this. So this is true for ACF as well as PACF. If this happens, we can immediately say that to some extent the model that we have assumed that is F is correct. Of course, this is not enough because we also need variance of ZT to be constant. So what we have is ZT hat. Now since expectation of ZT is 0, actually ZT hat square is a representative of sigma square, or you can say variance of ZT. So what we do is that we try to plot either absolute of ZT or ZT square. So plot this. Now again, what is plot in the sense we don't simply plot this, plot the ACF, PACF of this. And again, if these are not running through the time, it indicates that the variance remains constant. Okay, so you can plot the ACF, PACF of this and then see that whether the variance remain the same or not. So let us go back and then, so this is what basically the residual analysis. Now this whole idea, so what is that we are looking for? We are looking for the residuals to be uncorrelated or not. So you can do it in a graphical manner. You can also do it by a statistical test procedure. So what is the test procedure? Generally you can think of, we compute the sample correlation, add a few of them depending on how many you can compute for a given set of data, and then see that if you can find out a distribution theory attached to that, you can see that whether they are significantly different from 0 or not. So if it is significantly different from 0, it indicates that the correlations are significant or autocorrelations are significant. So white noise is not there, which means that your model has to be reworked. Okay? So let's go back and then try to see this test. So we have fitted the model by making the assumption expectation of z equal to 0, variance of z equal to sigma square, covariance of z equal to 0 for t not equal to s. So once we fit a time series model decided by some criteria, residuals are available, examine whether the above assumptions made on innovations are really true in the case of data at hand and the model we have fitted. So this is done by plotting the residual, plotting the square of residuals and visually confirming the stationarity by observing the time series plots of AC plots and ACF and PACF plots of residual. So you can also carry out a test of hypothesis for ZT for stationarity, because we are saying that it is stationary. White noise means it is stationary. So I need to verify that also. I need to verify the uncorrelatedness. I need to verify the constant variance. So all these things form a part of residual analysis in the case of a time series. So statistical tests can be used for testing the uncorrelatedness of residuals. Okay. Now, what kind of tests which are famous or which are basically used in this context? So generally these kind of tests are known as portmanteau test. Two of them we will discuss. In fact, there are a couple of them that you can see. There are some non-parametric tests as well, but we don't get into all those tests. Mostly the computer, any software gives you the link box text, and some software you can also ask for McLeod and Lee test. After all, I mean, both of them gives you almost the similar kind of things. So let's look at link box test. So link box test, what he does is that for I equal to 1 or j equal to 1 to h, you square the autocorrelations of the residuals. Okay, but of course you have to normalize them by dividing it by n minus j and multiply it by n into n plus 2. Then Ling and Box proved that this is having a chi-square with h degrees of freedom. Now you know, once it is chi-square with h degrees of freedom, I can quickly calculate this for any h, and if this turns out to be rejecting this, I mean like we can see whether we are rejecting or accepting the, not rejecting the hypothesis, and accordingly I can decide. So if larger value of this implies this is significant, which implies that we reject the hypothesis that the given z is a white noise. A smaller value indicate that this is insignificant. Therefore, we don't have enough evidence to reject the null hypothesis that z is a white noise. So z will become a white noise. So here also, what is crucial here is to the proof that this is chi-square. Again, I told you we may not be in a position to actually do all these things, so we don't actually prove that, but you should know that this is basically, so I assume that and I use this test. And here also the procedure is to reject the IIDness or the white noise if this is greater than chi-square at alpha level. Now McLeod test is also more or less same thing, but McLeod's, what happens that he consider the, this is basically, I think there is something wrong here. This doesn't have square here because, oh no, it is having square, but McLeod and Lee consider the autocorrelations of squares of residual, whereas here they consider autocorrelations of the residual themselves. Yeah, that's a difference. So McLeod and Lee consider the same statistics, but it is corresponding to the squares of the residuals. And then he again proved that it has a chi-square H distribution, squared data, whereas this one is that of not squared, the direct residuals. And then in the test statistics you may be computing a square, but the correlation is that of residuals. Here the correlation is that of residual squares, and simply test this hypothesis that. So this is statistical procedure. What is the graphical procedure? Plot ACF and PACF. Another thing that we assume that in the usual situation, if you remember that this is your model, like for example I might have assumed yt is equal to f of yt minus 1 theta plus zt. I assumed that this is normal. So I need to, now that I have the zt hat, so I'll verify this. Verify normality. Now, normality verification you already know, because this exercise you have been doing in the regression as well. There are several tests. Perhaps here there is one new test that we will be using. In your regression, you might have used Kolmogorov, Smirnov, Shapiro, Wilks, Anderson, Darling, all these tests. Here we have another test which uses, skewness as well as kurtosis together. The skewness of the normal distribution is 0 and kurtosis is 3. So what we are trying to see, that is it deviating from 0 too much? Statistically significant deviation is there or not? for the skewness, as well as statistical significant deviation is there for the kurtosis from 3. So the test at this test is given by Jack and Bira, Anil Bira. Anil Bira is a statistician, Indian statistician who is in US, settled in US, and Anil Bira and Jack, they actually came up with this test statistics, which basically test mu3 square. This is m3 square. This is for the sample data. So m3 square upon m2 cubed. You can take this 6 outside because then. So it is m3 square upon m2 cubed. So it's like mu3 square upon mu2 cubed. That is what it is. So the sample version of that plus and m3 mu4 minus mu2 whole square minus 3 whole square by 24. Now you may say that now why all these numbers, because it create problem because I know only mu3 square upon mu2 cubed or mu4. No, with that actually you are not going to get a distribution theory. So you have to adjust this in such a way that you have a proper distribution theory available. So what is the distribution theory that Jack and Bira proved? They proved that this JB statistics under the null hypothesis. So what is the null hypothesis? That XTs are IID normal. Under this null hypothesis, this is distributed as a chi-square with 2 degrees of freedom. So they just simply compute this quantity and see whether it is rejecting or not rejecting the hypothesis. Accordingly, we conclude that you have normality or not. So this is what about the distribution selection for ZT as well as that of model F, whether the F that you have selected or the theta that you have estimated or the functional formation of F and theta, is it really appropriate? I would say exact, because no models are exact. So we would say appropriate for the given data. So this is what the first part of it. Next part of it, okay, suppose now that I have a set of competing model, how are you going to do this exercise? So that's where the model selection comes. In other words, say for example, you have a situation where even if it is like for the data, suppose I have the data YT, time series data. So I may have, you may have an ARMA 2-3. I have an AR, say 8 model, or ARMA, say 3-3. So all these are giving almost behaving similarly. Behaving similarly in the sense that for all the cases you are getting ZT is a white noise, autocorrelations are not significant, normality may be accepted, but then which one I choose? So I'll have a problem here. So in such a case, one of course, you can actually look into the AIC, BIC criteria, which you might have seen. Sorry, I think I should not write it here. The AIC, BIC criteria. So you should compute the AIC, BIC corresponding to these models and see that which of them is smaller, and then choose the model accordingly. So this is what Kai-K information criteria and Bayes information criteria, and then choose the model accordingly. Another thing is that, okay, now that, for example, if AIC is also not distinguishing between these three, then I will go for a model ARMA 2-3, because this has about 5 parameters, whereas this has 6 and this has 8 parameters. So I'll use the thing parsimonious model. Go for the parsimonious model, okay, the one which is having less number of parameters. So this is what, so model selection. Now I think I wanted to tell you one more thing. Perhaps I might have told this already, but still I am repeating. See what happens that if this is the set of all models, possible models, and this is the true model. And we don't know that actually. True model is not known. But we have the data and we come up with a model like this. So this is the model. So what I would like to see, if different choices of f as well as different I mean like how many, what is the order, like this I have taken all of them, like yt minus 1, yt minus 2, etc. I have taken up to y1. I may not have to take all of them, maybe I have taken only two of them, yt minus 1 and yt minus 2, or I may go for three of them. So of course, when I say I go for two of them, I go for three of them, the number of parameters also changes. So looking at all these things, I'm going to have different models. So all those models lie here. All these are possible models. These are all possible models. Okay, this is a true model. You can have possible models here also. So what are you going to do? So your selection procedure is such a way that these criteria should allow you, or criteria should enable you to have a model this to be chosen. The one which is more close to the true model. So true model is not known, but still we will be in a position to identify the one which is closer to that using one of these criteria, and then we pick up that and then propose that model and use that for all our further procedures. Okay, so this is what I'm sorry, I'm just so this is what we consider in this context. So let's look at this further. So this is basically now what happens, that there is something called a bias variance trade-off. So what happens that here, if you go for the bias variance trade-off is something like this. If you have like so you go for a model with more parameters, you may get good fit, less bias, but more variance. Less parameters, not very good fit, more bias, but less variance. So this is what happens. So what happens that you have very less parameters, then it will be more biased model. You have more parameters, it will not be that much bias, but then the more variance will come. So always there is a bias variance trade-off in the model selection, right? So it's like very simple. I think I used to tell you that the when I have 2 points and then I consider both points, then I don't have a choice. I have to join them. I mean, if I'm looking for a straight line model. But if I just consider only one of them, and then now that I can actually think of, okay, this point is here, but I can have this model, this model, this model, because tomorrow if a new one comes, this still continue to be a model which can be used, because that is what basically. So I I will have less variance in such a case. But here what happened, that less bias but more variance is going to happen in this case. Okay, so this is what basically the model selection act. So parsimony is another one, like a less number of parameters that you should choose. So there are different criteria that we can use. So for AR model selection, there is something called a finite prediction error. This derivation we are not considering now, but one can compute this quantity, and this quantity is given by sigma square hat. Basically, I mean sigma square hat n plus p by n minus p, and choose the model such a way that minimize the one-step mean square error when the model fitted to xt is used to predict. So this is what basically. Oh, sorry. you don't have to worry about this. You can simply consider this formula. This is called finite prediction error. This is not a very good criteria for MA type model. It's good for AR type model. And then we have the Akaike information criterion, which is suggested by Akaike. This is one of the breakthroughs in the statistics in the 20th century. This is basically what you are trying to do is that, see, you are trying to look at the log likelihood. Now, with a minus sign, this will be as minimum as possible. But then what happened that if you because log likelihood is nothing but a probability. So what happened that if your model is having more and more parameters, this is going to be a bit higher probability will be there. So that what happens, this will be very less quantity. So you may think that we can simply give the more number of parameters. So it gives an overfit kind of a thing. So you keep on increasing the parameters. So in order to control that, there is a penalty here, which is basically twice the dimension of m. M is the model. So basically, approximate unbiased estimate of Kullback-Leibler distance. Right now, you don't have to get into this, but basically, that's a distance function from the true model. So G is true model is G. I think that star, which in the previous, so this is my G. So this is, if you look at this star is G, and these are my F's, and I'm trying to minimize this distance. So this fellow minimize that distance. Particular type of, you can define different types of distances. So here the Kullback-Leibler distance is used in this case. So that's why it's called, yeah. So this is, you get an expression, what is called Akaike information criteria. So pick up the model for which this is minimum. That's what the ultimate thing. It's very easy to compute, but the derivation is quite involved. I used to take these derivations earlier, but then I realized that it takes at least an hour or so to have a derivation. So maybe right now it is not required. We can have AIC can be just adopted, and then you can have the Akaike information criteria formula like this, where M is the model and the number of parameters in that. So that's what called the dimension of M. So this proof is given. There's a book, very good book by Model Selection, Bunham and Anderson, or there is another book by Heorth and Claskens, Model Selection and Model Averaging. So this is popular among model selectors or applied statistician. AIC has a tendency to overfit. This is like R square, because you increase the number of parameters, R square will increase. So that is what the problem with the R square, something similar to that. But you have a consistent, there's another model selection, that is AIC is corrected for its overfitting behavior, and so the correction is only here. Instead of two dimension into M, they consider, because this is 2 dimension of M, they consider n by n minus dimension minus 1. So you can see that, when you fix this, this is basically should go to 1, because this is just n minus some fixed quantity, and this is n. So as n become larger and larger, this is actually going to 1. But definitely this is inflating, or this is depending on the sample size, whereas that is not the case in the earlier one. So you have more information, more sample, the penalty actually plays a role. In fact, this will become more and more, because it will be greater than 1. So that you are increasing this as n become larger and larger. So the penalty will be, so AIC basically correct the penalty, got more extreme penalty for large order model, which counteracts with the overfitting tendency. So this is called AIC corrected. Another criteria is BIC. So where Bayesian information criteria. There is no Bayesian, apparently you will see here, because the first term is same in all the three. There is only a difference in the penalty. So in this BIC, the penalty is, in the other case it was just twice dimension of M, in the case of AIC. In the case of AIC corrected, it is twice dimension of M multiplied by n upon n minus dimension of M minus 1, right? This one. And here it is log n. So this is base information criteria. Again, the proof of this is, of course, the proof is quite lengthy. PIC, the BIC can be. Now all software basically use this. So basically these are called penalized likelihood. This is the likelihood, and there is a penalty for that. So likelihood will be more if you have more parameters, and because probability will be very high, and then this control that. That's what happens. So BIC penalty is larger than that of AIC penalty, or BIC attempt to correct the overfitting. And the thing is that BIC has also some problems, reluctant in selecting model with larger number of parameters. If you have a very large number of parameters, this BIC one may not select. Because what happens that this will become, this become much more smaller and smaller. That's what happens. So BIC, but however, there is one important property. You can see that the probability that BIC select the correct model will tend to 1 as n become larger. So that means BIC is a consistent model selection. So this is what the BIC is. And so here I will give a summary of the steps involved in a data analysis or in a time series fitting. So whatever we have learned so far, either you can start with an exploratory analysis. It is not mandatory that you have to do an exploratory analysis, but some people are happy with exploratory analysis only. So we start with an exploratory analysis where we will read the time series, plot the time series, decompose, and then try to forecast without any distributional probabilistic assumptions. So this is what the exploratory analysis. Then we go for the Box-Jenkins ARIMA model, where you make transformations, difference, make it stationary, fit an ARMA model, and then try to get the residual, verify the residuals, go back if you want to improve the model, and then if you finally, whatever model that you have, you go for the forecasting once you finalize it. Okay. Well, in this ARIMA, you can replace with seasonal ARIMA as well, because some cases seasonality will be very much visible here, so differencing can be taken care of seasonal differencing. Okay, that's all about. Thank you.